Welcome back to the IoT podcast. I'm your host, Tom White. Every week we are joined by the biggest names in IoT to unravel the trends, misconceptions and predictions for the Internet of Things. Before we get into today's episode, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're watching or listening on and turn on that notification bell so you're never out of the loop. Today's episode, I'm joined by Tanya Suarez, a founder at IoT Tribe, a global ecosystem of IoT startups, entrepreneurs and innovators. Tanya is also the governing board member at the General Assembly of European Quantum Industry Consortium. In today's episode, we'll be talking all things quantum computing, exploring how IoT and quantum are being used together. We're also getting into some use case examples of where quantum has been successfully applied to enhance performance of IoT devices. And later on, we'll be looking at the impacts of future smart cities and urban developments, plus lots more. Let's get into it. Before we get into the episode, shout out to our sponsor today, 5V Tech. 5V Tech are specialists in finding people who make technology a force for good in the world. They bridge the gap between talent and deep tech businesses around the globe. Click the link in the description to find out more. Tanya, welcome to the IoT podcast show.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for being so patient and waiting to get the slot to come on. I know we engaged quite some time ago, but it's really good to bring you on and to have a chat. So, as always, could you explain a little bit about who you are, your business, IoT Tribe, and what that does?
Well, thank you again for having me here today, and I hope the wait is worth it for the listeners. I'm sure it will be for me. So first of all, a little bit about IoT Tribe. It's just one of my companies. I have several, but IoT Tribe, essentially what we do is we help organizations build out complex technology ecosystems. And the way we do that is through the delivery of accelerator programs that support advanced technology startups. The founders come from all over the world, and generally, once they come to accelerate a program, we work with them on their product market fit. We introduce them to our networks, to investors, to potential clients. But the really important thing is that they remain part of the tribe. So it's a relationship that starts within an accelerator, but then goes far, far beyond that.
Amazing, yeah. It's always rather special when I hear about accelerators or incubators, because I think the IoT world actually is quite disparate in the sense that you have very large PLCs and a lot of startups, and I think those folks can do with some help actually. From business processes to funding, etc. So I always think it's such a lovely thing to do, to be able to help people get into business and try and scale their companies beyond an idea, right?
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. This isn't really just about a proof of concept, because you might have a product or a service. It may involve hardware, it may not. The Internet of Things is no longer just about a few sensors stuck on some piece of machinery somewhere. It's much, much more complex than that. And understanding how your product, your solution really integrates or is integrated within somebody's business is actually a really complex endeavor. You need to understand data flows, you need to understand and make sure that cybersecurity issues are covered. It's not something that for a startup, early stage startup, even if you've got a team of 5-6 people, it's not something that's terribly easy to do.
It's a fantastic thing, as I mentioned, but you're quite the entrepreneur. You mentioned that you've got several other businesses as well, including, I think it's the Net Zero Alliance and other ventures and programs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the entrepreneur is it sounds like a very grandiose way of putting things. I've got another company that's called BluSpecs, and we work at the intersection of technology, policy, and skills. And the Net Zero Tech Alliance, as you've just pointed out, is actually a spin out from IoT Tribe. And the reason we span it out was because a lot of the startups, but also clients, were looking to really explore solutions that were going to help them decarbonize their operations, their activities, and essentially their business, across multiple domains and business areas. And what we found that while some technologies were there and they're ready to be integrated, others are actually probably still in labs. You know, if we're looking at, for example, uh, for the efficient storage of energy, a battery technology still has quite a long way to go, especially if you're looking at storing renewable energies. So that's where the Net Zero Tech Alliance was born, and that's what we're currently in the process of setting up. It's very exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's very on trend at the moment with the way business is moving forward, both with government pledges around the world, from a kind of net zero carbon perspective, the EV movement, etc., and generating some real momentum. But it feels like it's the right thing to do, actually, doesn't it? You know, the right thing to be focusing on.
Absolutely, and I think that the key thing here that it's not just about business. So we have UCL as one of our founder members, and you know the role of science here is absolutely critical. You know, you've obviously heard of companies doing a lot of greenwashing and saying they're doing more things than they perhaps in reality are. But I think one of the real challenges is to really kind of establish where your emissions are with a scientific measurement of what they are now, and measure what you're doing to reduce those over a period of time.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, what a background, and you know, again, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. So, what are the key topics that we're going to talk about today, and something that's been listed, and in fact, it's one of the first times it's been touched on in the IoT podcast, which is crazy to say because it's something that's kind of been at the peripheral of a lot of technology, both within generative AI, which is getting a lot of hype at the moment, but of course IoT and what was machine to machine is the concept of quantum computing. And I think quantum has the potential to really, for want of a better phrase, and that is somewhat cliche, but shift the dial actually in terms of how we go about modernizing data platforms and general infrastructure within technology itself. And Tanya, you've recently been re-elected, I understand, as a governing board member at the General Assembly of the European Quantum Industry Consortium, I believe.
Yeah, it's QuIC. It's called QuIC.
Quite a mouthful. Is that right?
It is, and it's QuIC for short.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but
Yes.
yeah, no, I've been involved. Actually, I think I was looking at it earlier since 2021 now. So the QuIC is absolutely growing. I wouldn't say exponentially, but very, very steadily. As quantum technologies are maturing, but also as the market is becoming more aware of what they have to offer. And perhaps just a minor correction, if I may, on what you said. You were talking about quantum computing, and quantum is not just about computing. You also have quantum sensing and quantum communications. Although the quantum computing and the qubits and the race between these huge tech giants the world over, that's what's really capturing, I think, the press. But there are going to be significant advances across all quantum areas in the years to come. And again, that's going to require a shift in how companies prepare themselves for the good things and possibly some bad things that quantum will bring.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for the clarification. I think it's interesting, actually, isn't it? It kind of rolls off the tongue, quantum computing, but of course there are other elements of quantum, and I think that's a really useful point that you've just made there. So for some of our listeners, and to kind of take it from the top, what is quantum in your view, and and why is it so important?
Well, so just to start with a 60-second kind of like basic, quantum computing essentially uses quantum bits or qubits. They can exist in multiple states at once. So you probably will have heard the old explanation of, with a normal bit, a computer bit, it is either 1 or a 0. A qubit can be a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And that property is called superposition. And essentially what it does is enable quantum computers to process vast number of possibilities simultaneously. So that's kind of like the really, really exciting thing about quantum at the moment. Quantum sensing involves quantum systems to measure physical quantities and properties with much more precision than we're able to at the moment. And finally, quantum communications, that's based on quantum entanglement and superposition again to transmit information that is fundamentally secure. So it's secure at the point it is being generated. It isn't information that's generated first and then cryptography is applied, or any other type of technology is then applied to make it secure. It's actually secure at the moment it's being generated.
Yeah, I mean, that really is, when you put it that way, it really is fundamentally more advanced. You talk about binary code, of course, ones and zeros, right? And for it to be in both positions at the same time, the superpositions. I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, going to show my ignorance here, but was it is it Schrodinger's cat? Is it the example?
Schrodinger's cat,
Yeah,
yeah,
Schrodinger's
absolutely,
cat. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's a really horrible image if you think about it, right? They could have, come up with something nicer than thinking of a cat being alive and dead at the same time. But the fact is, both through the original metaphor and through subsequent things like, Big Bang Theory, that's what really captures people's imagination. So it's probably one of the first things people learn about when they look into quantum. They look up what is Schrodinger's cat and what does it mean.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's one of the things that stuck in my mind many years ago when I was first kind of heard about Watson with IBM, etc., and kind of looked into it. So yeah, absolutely. So I guess specifically, this is an IoT podcast, and the advantages and potential of quantum and IoT is going to be quite interesting. So how do you believe quantum and IoT can work together in the future? What does that look like?
Well, that's actually a really complex question because, for example, IoT at the moment you use IoT for sensing and collecting information. In the future, that technology may change completely, and you just may want to use quantum sensing, for example, for something completely where you would absolutely want something to be unobtrusive. So, for example, brain scans. That's where quantum sensing would provide an absolute step change in the quality of the images, but also the granularity of the data, and then of course how that data can be analyzed. It's being used at the moment across, well, I should clarify that it isn't actually being used by anyone at the moment. It's being explored by many, many different companies. And I was at a conference, it was the Economist Commercializing Quantum conference not too long ago, and BMW were explaining one of their use cases. And if you think of a BMW, it has a rather nice, or some of them have rather nice rear wings, commonly called spoilers. And what they were looking at is how to actually optimize the design of those spoilers. And if you look at that theory in detail, it actually belongs to computational fluid dynamics, of which I know nothing, I have to say. But they were explaining that the number of parameters that they would need to optimize a spoiler properly runs into the millions, and probably into tens of millions, if not even thousands of millions or billions, because they have to look at parameters as diverse as angle of attack, wing size, wing position, material, the car speed, even external environmental factors. So if you look at that, just one element of a car and all of the pieces of data that are required to design it in an optimum way, so that you perhaps use more fuel, and therefore you're able to decarbonize your journey, if you like. It really is amazing.
Yeah. I think it's almost breathtaking, actually, isn't it? How fundamentally the change can be from the ground up, actually. And I think that's a fantastic example there. And in terms of IoT Tribe, then, in terms of partners and some of the exploratory work, even proof of concept work at the moment that's happening with quantum, could you talk a little bit about that and initiatives within the ecosystem?
Yeah, so we're not actually working, we haven't delivered a quantum accelerator yet. I think that it's true to say that it's up until very recently, it's been something that was a little bit too far from the market for us to be able to engage with. I think that that's actually changing, and a number of companies operating or wanting within the quantum technologies generally. So whether it's computing or whether it's communications or sensing, a number of them are actually startups, and they're startups that are raising a lot of money, both within Europe but also in the US and elsewhere. And what they have is breathtaking technologies and capabilities, but what they require is that ability to be able to test those with real world cases, so use cases, to really be able to, for example, access data or to prove that something is going to be adding the value that they say it's going to be adding. So it's a field that will be advancing insofar as everyone advances along with it. It's not going to be something that can just progress within a lab, or even, as you know, we were speaking earlier before we went on air about generative AI and how quickly that went from lab to market. That's not going to be the case with quantum. It is much more complex.
Yeah, that's interesting. You should say that. What? Why? Why is that the case? Obviously, it's more complex, but generative AI is making such leaps and bounds. Is it just because um, the complexity of the subject matter, or its ability to actually go into enterprise level and start to have real world uses, which is the issue? That's an interesting thing just to delve into a little bit more, actually.
It's the science. It's absolutely first of all, the science. So, for example, for quantum computers to be useful, there's going to be a need to really work on things like noise reduction. Current noise essentially refers to the amount of kind of information, or the dispersity of the different kind of like atoms, etc. I can't go into that into too much detail because I'm not an expert, but it is one of the challenges that's being that has to be solved at a scientific level before many computers can reach the scale required to operate within the real world.
Yeah. It's just such a fascinating space, isn't it? I remember a couple of years ago, I was at an IoT security event when we were talking about post quantum security, actually,
Yes.
and what that would look like in IoT. And it is such a fundamental shift. And I've said that a few times, and I guess it's because the world knows a computer from being on or off, as you say, right? From binary, from the NAND and NOR gates in the actual silicon. So for it to be both at the same time really is quite fundamentally different. And I think the other challenges, of course, is perhaps power and consuming, and how much power it takes to run some of these quantum machines. I remember reading the stories about Watson, as I mentioned earlier, and the sheer scale of this isn't for the faint-hearted either, is it?
No, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. So at the intersection with IoT, one of the really interesting areas is indeed in cybersecurity. So a lot of IoT devices, and the IoT generally just opens up so many opportunities for bad actors to exploit vulnerabilities. That clearly can't happen within kind of like a new post-quantum world, in a new post-quantum world. And a lot of companies now are looking at how they can introduce things like quantum key distribution, homomorphic encryption. There are a number of different technologies and approaches to make sure that, for example, in the financial sector, once quantum computers are more widely available, or start to become widely available, or available full stop, they need to have to be widely available. These organizations have the tools to be able to protect themselves against these kind of potentially nefarious actors.
Mm. Yeah, because I think technology, being a tool, like any tool, it's both good and bad, depending on which hands it's in,
Exactly.
right? And I can imagine, yes, as we start to move towards, cashless societies and so on, having quantum computers in the wrong hands could actually be really dangerous, actually hugely dangerous, and in fact, potentially catastrophic. Right?
Exactly, and just to say that it's not just about obviously the financial sector. If you look at attacks on infrastructure, we've just seen the dam being blown up in the Ukraine, and there are so many different examples in which technology and vulnerabilities within a system and a system of systems could be exploited. That this is something that has to be looked at right at the outset. It can't be an add-on or a plaster that's stuck on when these solutions are, as I say, rolled out to the broader environment.
There's a business I know called QuIC, actually,
Yeah.
who have spoken around this, and I think it's the whole principles of secure by design, right? And I think ever more so when it comes to quantum, to ensure that they're adhered to before layering in functionality on top, because if the foundations aren't secure and safe, you won't be able to scale, and it would expose vulnerabilities later on.
Yeah, and within QuIC, we've got quite a few members are really working on this as night and day. So Qubits, that's a UK-based startup. There's QSide, Barcelona-based, and there are lots of different approaches as well, which I think is a really interesting thing. This is not necessarily going to be one single approach to ensuring that security or that cybersecurity. But very many different approaches at different positions or different points in the value chain. Because again, within a connected economy, and this is something that is very much part of what the IoT is. So the Internet of Things is about connections between different parts. It's not just the device. It's not just about sensing a particular or within a particular environment. It's about the connectivity more generally and more broadly between that particular device, other devices, the user, other data sets that may be connected within that domain, or may be reaching out to, deployed in other completely different areas and markets. So it's incredibly complex.
Yeah, absolutely. To bring it up a little bit of a level, we did promise each other off air that we weren't getting into the complexities of it too much. But
Yes, sorry.
I think no, it's okay. I think it can literally hurt your brain sometimes when it talks about quantum. I'm so envious and admire people who work in quantum for that reason, because it, and again, this can't be underestimated. If you've ever worked in computing, it's like relearning everything that you've ever known.
It completely is.
And then going again, and that's incredibly hard. Anyone that's working in quantum that's listening, I admire and respect you in equal measure for the work that you're doing, because it is so magical, actually. Talking about the future a little bit, then. So one of the pointers that we were going to discuss today was how smart cities and sustainable urban developments can benefit from quantum and the convergence of this into IoT. And I'm guessing this is quantum sensors. This is being able to interpret much larger amounts of data that gets thrown up from smart cities. Is that the idea here?
Well, we're sitting, in the middle of cool offices, hopefully, but outside our walls, Europe definitely is melting, and one of the biggest challenges for cities and urban environments is going to be, of course, climate change. So, if we look at some of the possible contributions that quantum could make within that very specific field, for example, climate modeling. So quantum computers could significantly enhance our ability to model the Earth and our climate. Climate models are really, really complex. Again, that horrible word, apologies for using it quite so often, but they do require vast amounts of computational power. So that ability to deploy algorithms and to reach answers and solutions more quickly is going to be absolutely critical. But beyond that, if we look at other types of solutions, so carbon capture, Quantum computers could help design new materials or processes for capturing and storing carbon dioxide. They could also help discover new materials, for example, for solar panels or other clean technologies. I mentioned batteries earlier, so discovering new high performance cells or efficient designs for wind turbine blades. All of these things would absolutely have an impact on how we can deal with climate change. I don't know whether we can prevent it, but hopefully at least mitigate it. These are really, really exciting possibilities.
Yeah, no, I mean that's incredible. It just got me thinking as well about the use of quantum and AI actually, to understand a significantly more higher level amount of data to make informed decisions. If you look at some of the models at the moment from a generative point of view, they're fairly rudimentary. I mean, ChatGPT 4
and unreliable.
Yes, very unreliable. And and funny that just as a by story, you can often check that by asking ChatGPT 4 Bard to write a bio on yourself, and then do it every week, and you'll see that it changes, but it does learn. So I think the first time I ever did it, I graduated from Cornell University, so I'm not quite sure how it got that. But I think the point is, of course, quantum and AI to be able to decide, those really tricky questions in the same way a level 5 autonomous car has to decide actually, do I crash into this or do I crash into that, right? Because crashing is the only option. So it'll be really interesting to see how that develops and how far away we are from that rolling out. I mean, are we talking 5, 10, 15, 20 years? How long are we talking before, in your opinion? And by no means am I going to hold you to this, or anyone going to hold you to this. But how long are we talking 20, 30 years before quantum could be used?
No, I don't think it is that long. But if I knew the answer to that, then I'd probably be down the bookies at the moment, placing a rather large bet. So there's something intermediate. So before reaching full-scale quantum capabilities, there's a lot of hybrid computing happening at the moment. So that's applying some quantum principles and some quantum capabilities to I would hesitate to call them traditional computers, but certainly high performance computers. So that HPC segment of the market is a market that's absolutely burgeoning at the moment, and it's giving rise to all sorts of other technological needs. So, for example, the design and development of chips and everything that comes with that. So the need to secure, again, supply chains and ensure something that in Europe is called strategic autonomy. So if you're at all in the kind of like the policy sphere, this is on the word or the phrase on everyone's lips. So again, really, really interesting things that are signaling that the attention and possibly the step change that's going to be coming soon, not necessarily in full quantum capabilities, but in the road to full quantum capabilities.
Yeah, I can see that happening actually. I can see it being very exciting, but also quite daunting at the same time. I think we just need to be really minded about the advancements we're making and making sure that it's being harnessed in the right way. We touched upon that earlier, because it could very quickly not be and get out of hand actually.
I completely agree. Yeah.
But
there are good things as well. So sorry to interrupt you there, but
no,
so another example, there's a company called Multiverse, and what I love the phrase, they do quantum inspired algorithms. So I think that there's the nice thing about within the quantum ecosystem, within the quantum community, there's this real thirst for knowledge, there's this real thirst for collaboration, and that's a positive thing. Then I think you said it earlier, the use you make of the technology is it can be used for good, used for not so good, and used for downright evil. But as long as we do retain that kind of collaborative mindset, and that thirst for knowledge should be, hopefully, between all of us, will make sure, or we can help ensure that it's used for good.
What a way to finish the topic on quantum. I don't think I can top that. I think that's absolutely great. No, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I can't wait to see it happening. I definitely want to learn more about QuIC, and hopefully we can drop a link in the comments for people to understand more about QuIC, and to see some of the work that the members are up to there. But as we come near to the end of the wrap up of the show today, Tanya, we always ask certain questions, and the question I'm going to ask you, the first one is, what is your prediction for IoT this year? Do you have a strong wish or prediction, and perhaps I should go down the bookies after this, about something that you think is going to come true, or something that you would like to come true in IoT this year?
I think that there are a couple of things, and we're seeing this in quite a few lines of work that we're involved in. So there's definitely going to be a move to the edge. So a lot more computing is going to happen kind of on device and on premises, rather than necessarily all of that data being sent to the cloud. And of course that is it's good, because essentially, there's a huge cost to all of those data centers crunching numbers and crunching data that we may or may not be using in the future. So the transition, or the not the transition, but an increase in processing at the edge. And the second, I think, and it's related to this, is the development of more application-specific chips. So, semiconductors and chips that are designed with a specific purpose in mind. I suspect that those two things are going to come to pass in the near future.
Yeah.
Or at least be more ubiquitous than they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had Yang Yongboom on from Edge Impulse talking about TinyML. We've had Evgeny Gusev from Qualcomm TinyML Foundation. So I absolutely believe and understand what you're saying. It kind of needs to happen. It can happen. In the past, it was limited by the compute power of the device in which it was there. Actually, could it collect the data? Yes, it could. Could it send it back and be processed? Yes, but could it do it on-prem? Could it do it there and then? Well, in the past it couldn't, right? And now it can. So I completely back you up on that, Tanya. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We've got a question from our audience. Are there any projects or collaborations between IoT startups and quantum computing companies that you find noteworthy or promising so far?
So I think the biggest thing to say there is that a lot of quantum computing companies are actually startups themselves. So you've of course got the big players, IBM, you've got Thales, mentioned BMW with its own quantum computing department and teams. But the key area I think we mentioned already is around cybersecurity. That's one where IoT companies are going to really have to understand what the risks are and start to design the systems taking into account that kind of post-quantum world.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that. And a couple of quick fire questions, if I can, Tanya. If you could have any IoT powered gadget in your home, what would it be and why?
Right. Well, that's a really difficult question, because I'm trying to really kind of reduce our carbon footprint. So anything that's connected by definition will be using electricity and sending data. So if it was something that could power itself, so what I would really, really love, and again, this is probably because of the particular point in the year we're at, air conditioning that is, not as an eyesore as it is at the moment. The splits are absolutely hideous, but that can be powered, with renewable energy, and then run completely independently of any other cables. That would be absolutely lovely.
I bet, yeah. Solar power and energy harvesting, all of those good things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Energy harvesting, absolutely.
Yeah. And finally, a quote that you live by.
Oh, yeah, that one's easy. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and it's something that I say to my children a lot. But I do live by it myself as well.
I love that. Tanya Suarez, thank you so much for coming on to the IoT podcast. It's been excellent having you on. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you so much for the invitation, and look forward to hearing and reaching out to listeners as well. Thank you.
And Tanya, where can people find out more about yourself or IoT Tribe?
So IoT Tribe is iottribe.org, so nice and easy. And for me, the best thing is, I think if you Google me, you'll probably find quite a few things, but also I'm on LinkedIn. So Tanya with a Y, Suarez, and LinkedIn, that's IoT Tribe. I'm sure I'll come up.
Excellent. Tanya, once again, thank you very much for coming on to the IoT podcast.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the IoT podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're on. See you next week for more IoT talks and tales.